Hello, and welcome to the third in a series of videos discussing our parish networking project in Greene County and Ravenna, and why we are doing it, what we are hoping to achieve. If you haven't seen my first two videos in that series yet, please pause this video and go and watch them now. I'll include some links in the description for this video. But for a quick summary, in the first video I discussed what I call the pruning the vine philosophy that has governed a lot of the decisions about parish closures and mass cuts over the last, say, about 40 years, and how with our project we are seeking to try a different philosophy to prove that an alternative can work better. And in my second video I shared with you my personal story or inspiration as a pastor for helping our communities move into a reality, into a way of doing things where they will be able to carry on their missions with vastly less oversight from a priest. For this video, I want to focus on the fact that we are trying to create a system. This is one of our core goals of what we're doing, where all of our communities will have the support they need to reach out to their areas and evangelize. In order to grasp the kind of system we're hoping to create, I'm going to need to ask you to use your memories a bit as well as your imaginations. In the first place, take a moment and think back on our experiences for, say, the last 15 to 20 years. In particular with regard to changes and cuts in mass schedules, weekend mass schedules, that is. One of the things that we have observed over the last 15 to 20 years with cuts to mass schedules or even church closures, it's sometimes referred to as the 1/3 rule. And that's basically this. Whenever you make that kind of a change, about 1/3 of the people affected will end up where you're hoping they will end up. They will move to the new mass time or they will move to the new church. About another third will find a different church where they can continue doing what they were doing before. And then about another third end up nowhere at all. They don't move forward with the change, nor do they go to another church. I know over the years, as I have heard our parishioners reflect and share with me on those experiences, they've shared a great deal of pain. These kinds of changes in the ways people react to them has led to the real disintegration of a lot of our community life. Family members who were used to seeing one another at a particular mass, friends, neighbors, they end up separated, either because not everyone is able to move forward with the change, or not everyone understands the change and there's resentment over it. But regardless, it's eroded our community life. That, in turn, leads to a lot of discouragement. Because of the pruning the vine mentality, many people are fearful when they see, oh, a mass time was cut. Well, that's just one step toward closure because that's what happened over at St. So-and-so's before they closed. People think that way and they get frightened, they get resentful, or they, for whatever reason, pull back. Also, oftentimes, as parishes have been linked, as the number of priests has dwindled, and decisions were made about who would get which times, there's often a sense of resentment if one community, let's say, gets the proverbial good mass time or mass times and the other one doesn't. The community in whichever church doesn't get the so-called good times feels devalued. They walk away with a sense that their contributions are less important, their routines and schedules are less important, or that somehow they're second-class citizens to the members of the other community. This, in turn, often leads to a loss of income, either because people are simply moving to different masses and so they're putting their money in different collections, Or people are bittered or resentful, and as a sign of protest, they withhold their funds. That, in the long run, causes financial instability in whatever community was affected by those changes. And because all of these decisions over the last many decades have been motivated by the trend of a dwindling number of priests, then all of these knock on effects, if you will, have been trends. For years now, at least for a generation, we have seen a trend of our Catholic communities experiencing disintegration, discouragement, disaffiliation, and decline, especially financially. One of the things we know that's true about the foreseeable future, at least, is that the number of priests is going to continue to decline. Nevertheless, to take for granted that this dwindling number of priests necessarily means that our communities will continue to have to experience disintegration, discouragement, and decline, in my opinion, is absolutely unjust. That kind of thinking betrays a corrupted understanding of the role of the ministerial priesthood, one often referred to as clericalism. That is, an overvaluation of the importance of the ministerial priesthood that ignores that everyone else too is absolutely essential for the church to be what Jesus intends for her to be. God has blessed the people of all of our communities with wonderful gifts for the furthering of the mission of evangelization. Why should it be the case that communities of gifted, prayerful, generous disciples should be disbanded simply because there is not a priest who can be assigned to serve their needs full time and run things the way that everyone's accustomed to their being run? In fact, isn't that exactly the opposite of what's happening in those areas around the world where the church is growing the most? Consider the so-called mission territories of the church. Only a tiny proportion of the communities in our mission territories, the greatest growth areas of the church, think of Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, only a small proportion of those communities are served full-time by a priest. The vast majority of them only have contact with a priest for a few days out of a month, or even a few days out of the year. And yet these are the areas where the church is often most vibrant and is growing the fastest. At this point, based on the feedback I have been hearing for years from parishioners, from seminarians, other priests and deacons, even diocesan officials, I imagine there are a great many of you watching this video who are saying to yourselves, finally, finally, someone is realizing this and wants to do something about it. And now I'll ask you to use your imaginations a bit. Considering those trends that our communities have been experiencing for really decades at this point, those trends of disintegration, disaffiliation, discouragement, financial decline, think about what practical things would need to change to stop those trends from continuing, or perhaps even to begin reversing them. How, in other words, could we take a different approach and get a different result, a different outcome? In my mind, I see at least 4 things that would have to be a core part of the strategy. And let's say in particular with regard to questions about weekend Mass. In the first place, we would need to preserve an accessible Mass schedule. We would need to preserve some kind of schedule that allows ample access to the Eucharistic liturgy for as many people as possible. In addition to that, we also need a way of providing those masses that fosters robust community interaction, maybe before Mass or after Mass. It's important to remember in that there are, shall we say, windows of accessibility when it comes to Mass times. Theoretically, a priest could offer Mass at any time of day or night, but that doesn't mean it's accessible, especially not in our areas where many families even have to work on weekends just to make a living. Furthermore, we have to consider the role geography plays, especially in the situation of our network of Greene County and Ravenna, nestled here along the Hudson River and the Catskill Mountains. So, for example, if you could envision some way, maybe by rotation, for example, that we were offering a very ample Mass schedule with accessible times by rotating those around different churches, we would still have people unable to access them because of the distance they would need to travel or because of the geography itself. Not everybody has a car, or not everybody has a car that is reliable enough to drive from one corner of the county to another or up and down over the mountains, especially not in winter. So, whatever we would do for Mass schedules, in order to preserve the integrity of our communities, would almost certainly need to be supplemented by some other liturgies that would be presided over by perhaps a deacon or perhaps even a layperson. Third, we would need to communicate, communicate, communicate. Not only we priests and deacons or parish leaders would need to say this, but everyone would need to be hammering the message home to everyone else that the changes that we were making were not a prelude to closure, were not being made to favor one community over another, to give one an advantage over another, to create winners or losers, but was necessary to give absolutely everybody a good shot at creating a future for their communities. That message would have to be said over and over and over. And the fourth thing that I see, at least at this point, is that we would need to change how our parish funding works. By that, I mean we would have to create a system where people can support their communities financially, independent of how many masses their community can host or at what times they can host Mass. And now, I would ask you to envision what things would look like if we were actually able to reverse these trends that we've all been lamenting for the last generation. Imagine what it would look like if the church in our area was actually growing again. In my mind, as I use my imagination, as I dream of this, I see several things being different, being better. First, I see parish registrations being something that is a sign of net growth, not like what often happens now. A new family or a new couple will come to me and say, "Oh, Father, we want to register here in the parish." And I'll ask, "Oh, where are you coming from?" And then hear, "Well, from a couple towns over." "Oh, well, why are you coming here now?" "Well, we like the 11 o'clock Mass, and well, that got cut at our parish, so you have one here, and we're just going to come here now." It's like a giant game of Red Rover, Red Rover. It's not net growth. I see a reality in which all of our communities are thriving together, not just where some are thriving, perhaps thanks to certain personnel decisions that were made, while Others are struggling due to those very same personnel decisions. It would be a reality in which volunteers and donors would feel secure that they're creating a future for their communities that is going to be sustainable, not one that is constantly threatened by the dwindling number of priests, not one where there's always some kind of a sense that a shoe's going to drop or the axe is going to fall every time a priest is reassigned or retires. It would be a reality in which all of our communities could reach out to their areas and evangelize with ever increasing confidence and creativity. And maybe it's even a reality wherein those who feel that the church disregarded their needs or left them behind in these kinds of decisions of the past feel that they are indeed loved, wanted, and that their parish is striving to meet their spiritual needs. On that last point, it is absolutely essential that those who are currently volunteers or leaders in our parishes or current mass goers hear the information that I am laying out in these videos. Otherwise, we won't all have an understanding of why we are engaged in this large and very challenging networking project. Nevertheless, the reason I am choosing this format of YouTube videos to spread this news and not just doing bulletin articles or newsletter articles for those currently in the church is because I am trying to reach those of you who do feel that the church has left you behind over the years. It is one of my deepest hopes, in fact, that what you hear me saying in these videos communicates to you that you are loved, you are missed, we want you back, and that your parish leadership is really striving to create an environment in which you can trust that if you do come back, you won't simply be left behind again. And with that, as always, if you are seeing this video, please help me spread the word. You can do that by liking this video, sharing a link to it with someone you know needs to hear this news, and subscribing to this channel if you haven't already. I thank you for the time and the attention you have given in watching this video, and ask that you always remember to keep everyone in prayer as we are moving forward in this endeavor, and may God bless you all.